All right, it's that time of year for fantasy football drafts. With me to talk about it is Shane Hallam, managing partner of Draft Countdown. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me back. It's always nice talking to you, and so it's always nice talking fantasy a little bit. Instead of the draft and the Steelers, we get a little bit of this.
What is the deal with your glowing name in the back? Where do I get
You
something
know
like
what?
this? I
Like
need this.
my wife got it for me for my birthday. It's
Oh
my
my
Twitter my
god!
Twitter account shining behind me, so I got to show it off. It's it's nice. It's nice. I don't
I
have to say my
am
Twitter handle. It's right behind me.
I am jealous. That is amazing. Kudos to your wife. I gotta
Yeah.
find out how to get something like that. That is fancy, and it changes colors.
Yeah, you can set the color, you can change the colors. So she gets the gold star for
Oh
birthday gifts this
wow!
year for sure.
I'm gonna have to find out where to get it.
Wait,
That is. I didn't even know that something like that existed. That is fancy. All right, so talking about fantasy, what do you see as a do you see any major trend this year as opposed to previous years in fantasy football?
you and I were talking a little beforehand that not much has changed in terms of, I think, the overall kind of landscape of what this fantasy year looks like versus past years, especially when we have kind of a weaker rookie running back class. It's pretty similar. Like the first round is trending heavy toward running back because you only have this kind of handful of studs that are going to get almost every carry in the backfield, like a Najee Harris in Pittsburgh, right? He's going to be a first round, early second round pick in fantasy this year because he's getting the carries, the catches, everything. Now, obviously, last year we had Cooper Kupp emerged as a wide receiver. You had some of the, Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. There's a couple of these kind of big name receivers that are going in that first round, but we still kind of remain in a running back heavy environment because it thins out very quickly from the guys you feel like you can definitely rely on or have the ability to win you a week, to guys that might be backups on their own team, and that makes it difficult.
I think a trend in football in general is it becomes so pass happy. Yet in fantasy football, it always seems the same. It's like you got to get those running backs. You got to spend maybe the first two rounds go getting a running back is just because they're so scarce.
Right. I think it's funny because when I started playing fantasy in like the early 2000s, 2001, it was kind of the opposite. Like there was so many running backs because everyone, ran the football a little bit more. And so you took the elite receiver, you took Jerry Rice first because you weren't going to get that anywhere else. You weren't going to get that kind of player. You took Randy Moss, first because you could get the running backs later. Now, yeah, they're so scarce. You look at maybe you have 13 running backs. They feel like, okay, these are definitely guys I can rely on. And after that, it's tough because there are a lot of, there's someone like David Montgomery for the Bears, for example. It's probably going to get all the carries there, but they're not going to be very good. They're still going to pass the ball because everyone passes the ball. Can you really rely on him? People you don't want to, so you want to take those running backs early. I've kind of been a proponent of what's called the hero running back, where you take a running back in the first round and then you don't take another one for a long time. And I think because people are so running back focused, you can pick up value at receiver, at tight end, at quarterback. And then all you have to do is kind of, attack running back late, just pick a bunch of guys. And if one works out, then you got your RB2, you're good. I mean, look like James Conner last year. No one really drafted him in Arizona. He had all those touchdowns. If you can find that guy again, you could pick up a Chase Edmonds, you could pick up a Rashad Penny, then you don't need that second running back. So I think it's a viable strategy that might be different than what your league mates are doing. Take the stud round one, and then take everything else while they're still trying to pile up on running back.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, it seems like the conventional wisdom is take running back first two rounds, take wide receiver the next two rounds, and then maybe a tight end, take a quarterback late. It seems like that's what everybody does. Now one big question. It seems like Jonathan Taylor is the consensus number one overall pick, basically.
Yeah, unless you're in a PPR league, unless you're getting points for receptions, where Christian McCaffrey is starting to tick to kind of 50-50, but it's those two going away.
Wow, Christian McCaffrey, what a risk. Just such a risk, because he just, he's one of the top picks. Everybody's going to draft him, but who knows if he's going to get hurt again? Like, that's so tough. When you think with your first couple picks, you want to be as safe as possible. You want to make sure you got your studs. It's hard to draft someone like a McCaffrey.
A lot of the injury guys are like, look, he didn't have any soft tissue injuries. He didn't have any of this kind of lingering things. So, it is scary when I've drafted him last year and lost him for the season. But, I think I feel better about the Panthers than I ever have. And Baker Mayfield, not that Baker Mayfield's amazing, but he's better than Sam Darnold. He's better than what the Panthers have thrown out there at quarterback in the past. So at least, you feel like this offense might score a little bit. You might have something there. They upgraded the offensive line. So yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor's like, I want to be safe. I'm going to get the guy that's going to get probably top 5 in the NFL in carries and going to get every opportunity. Or, if you do get points for receptions, Christian McCaffrey could catch 70, 80 passes, and that's an extra 70, 80 points that, Taylor might only get 30 or 40 there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a risk worth taking. So yeah. I keep hearing about the 0 running back strategy. Is it really that popular, or is it just people that like being contrarian that do stuff like that?
Oh, I've tried it before. I generally have not done well, because I think it is, when you talk 0 running back, basically it's what I said with hero running back, except you don't have that first guy to kind of anchor you in and say, okay, I got, Jonathan Taylor, or I got Derrick Henry. I'm good there. Let me find one more. 0 running back is, I'm not taking any until, round 8, 9, 10. And then I'm just going to hit, 6, 7 of them. But now you got to hit on 2, right? You got to start 2 every week. So you got to hit on at least 2 running backs. I just find that to be really difficult to do. If you are someone, if you're in one or 2 leagues and you're super hyper focused and you like fantasy, like, it can work. You got to really work the waiver wire. Last year you had to pick up Elijah Mitchell from San Francisco. You had to get, when a guy got hurt, you had to pick up his backup. You had to get Cordell Patterson. You had to, sign on waivers running backs that could help you. I think it just takes a lot of focus and a lot of energy to get right. And honestly, I haven't had success. I personally just like, give me one and let me find it one more. And I think I can do that.
That just seems, because there are 2 slots on your team. How could you, put junk for those 2 slots and hope for something? Okay, yeah, you can hope, or maybe get, like you said, get something on the waiver wire. But boy, that's a risk. That's 2 slots on your team that you're kind of throwing away. You better have some real studs everywhere else.
Right. And oftentimes in that strategy, you're taking more wide receivers than you can start, right? You're taking 5, 6 receivers sometimes before you take a running back, and basically saying, okay, I need, 4 of those guys to be elite, depending on your scoring settings. If you start 3 receivers or you start 3 in a flex, I need 4 of those guys to be elite, and last year, maybe you got Jamar Chase and it worked out, but you could draft some duds at receiver too. And now you got to fill that position and you're like really behind the 8 ball. I just like, I'm not super Mr. Balanced roster or anything, but I at least want like one running back that I feel like I can rely on. And as long as he stays healthy, I'd much rather that than the alternative.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. People spend so much time on the draft and looking at things now and talking about, players and stuff like that. About a month from now, your team is going to look a lot different because of injuries and people that just you get off the waiver wire and trades you make and stuff like that. It's fun. And then come November, December, there are people that aren't even on a roster and on an NFL roster now that will become fantasy studs in November and December. It's funny. It's not something you need to worry about in, just spend time in August working on your team. It's an all year long thing, right?
Yeah. Just wait till October and everyone will be like, man, this is the worst year for injuries that I can ever remember. They say that every single year.
Every year.
I was like, didn't we just do this? Like, didn't we do this the year before? The year before?
Year, yeah.
Most of the guys, the NFL is a violent game. Most of the guys are going to get hurt, right? Like, it's going to happen. And so, yeah, I think it's why having that depth, or as you said, being able to kind of work the waiver wire, you're going to have guys get signed. We saw Devonta Freeman last year for the Ravens become relevant in fantasy. Like, it's bound to happen. Or, there's always like two tight ends that come out of nowhere that weren't even supposed to start for their teams, and they're scoring double-digit touchdowns. With Robert Tonyan 2 years ago for the Packers, like, just someone no one's ever heard of that emerges from this. And so it's why, like, if you just draft your team, and then forget about it, you're not going to win. You almost have to be engaged and try to pick up these players, even to block other people, so that you can get that advantage.
The other strategy is what to do about rookies. Some people go crazy about them. Some people avoid them. You kind of have to take a gamble, right? I mean, I came close to winning some leagues last year because I got Jamar Chase in like the 9th round or something like that. So you got to take a chance on some of them, right?
I think it's a smart strategy to I don't say load up your bench, but have a decent amount of bench spots dedicated to rookies, right? And usually for me, it's the receivers get a little more opportunity. We've seen some rookie running backs hit, but like someone like Breece Hall is going fairly early in drafts. He's going 4th, 5th round. Like, you're gonna have to spend a pretty good pick on him. Whereas you could take George Pickens for the Steelers, Jahan Dotson for Washington. You could take those guys toward the end of your draft, depending on who you're drafting with, and there's a chance that they break out and do really well. I always feel like, if I have a choice between a rookie or a veteran that's the number 2, number 3 on his team, like, what are the odds that guy's gonna win me the league? It's probably slim. But some of these rookies could, Chris Olave for the Saints could end up being the number 1 guy and get 90 catches, and you're looking pretty good. So I think it is worth investing on the bench in some of these rookies. If they're not good, they're not playing. Trey Sermon last year, just cut them. Just sign someone else. It's really easy. You can cut the rookie, but if they break out, if they get the job, they start getting playing time, they start producing, you can get a real value, I think, more than some of the older vets.
It's funny, you take some chances in the draft and you get people late that's maybe will pay off or something like that. But then when it comes time to especially when the bye weeks come, you have to get rid of those people. You have to, there's only so many roster spots for your weekly lineups. It's like, I have to get rid of these people. Sorry. So as far as quarterbacks, generally the strategy is wait on quarterbacks, right?
I think it's been the strategy, especially in fantasy circles. I think, and I'm coming around to it, and I think a lot of people are realizing the quarterbacks have become such point producers in fantasy that maybe waiting is not the best way to go anymore. I think especially because last year's rookie class was so bad. A lot of times that's where you get value, is like the year 2 guys that, Patrick Mahomes hadn't played. And if you drafted him going into year 2, you did really well. Or Lamar Jackson, when he started that full season. So I don't think those guys are there this year. I personally like investing, in a top 6-7 quarterback, which if you're in a 10-team league, doesn't have to be super early. But I do think there's a drop off after like Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow. If you're taking Trey Lance, you're taking Matthew Stafford, who's hurt. I think there's a lot more risk this year in waiting super late than taking one of the earlier ones. Just lock it down, play the guy every week, you're not working the waiver wire to pick someone up. I think it's better. Are there enough quarterbacks you can get by? Yes. You could take Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins and you're probably going to be fine. But I kind of like taking a Lamar Jackson, taking, those guys earlier and feeling like I have upside and I have a guy I can just play every week and not worry about it.
That's the thing. They score so many points. Yeah, I know. There's a lot of quarterbacks score a lot of points, but still, I just did a draft today and I took Josh Allen in the 3rd round and I'm okay with it. I think Josh Allen is going to throw like 50 touchdowns and have like an MVP season and be awesome. So I'm perfectly happy with that.
And if he does that, then you're going to the playoffs, right? Like your team's going to go to the playoffs. And once you're in the playoffs, who knows what happens? So I don't think it's a bad strategy. And I think we're getting to the point too, where, Josh Allen's been the consensus QB1, but some people are leaning Justin Herbert, and trying to get the next guy up. So you might even be able to get a value on a Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes this year.
So obviously the Bills are projected to be really good, but then you have your teams that are, it looks like on paper, going to be really bad. I'm talking about the Seahawks and the Browns. The Seahawks have DK Metcalf, Lockett. I'm not sure about the running back situation. I think it's Rashad Penny or something like that. The Browns have Nick Chubb, Njoku, Kareem Hunt, Amari Cooper, but they have horrible quarterbacks. What do you do when the team stinks? Do you stay away from those people, or do you think you get value in players on those teams? What do you do?
Personally, I think you can get successful fantasy players in 2 ways. Either those fantasy players are really good, the offense is scoring a lot of points. The teams you mentioned, it's not going to happen. So the other option is if they're like the only option, if there's 2 options, and then you're kind of getting force-fed the ball. I'll mention a team that you didn't mention, like the Bears. I like the Bears because Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet are the only 2 receiving options they have. They're probably going to get a lot of balls, and whereas I look at, say, the Seahawks, I'm not drafting DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I Noah Fant. I think there's a lot of guys that can get the ball there. So the receiving options I'm staying away from. I'll lean to running backs. Like, I think the offensive line's improved. I like Rashad Penny. He's cheap. He's going to start. Ken Walker's hurt. I'd rather go that route. And almost same thing for the Browns. I think Amari Cooper's going too early. But I just don't think Jacoby Brissett's like any good. And I think it's going to be a problem for most of the year, but I'll still take Nick Chubb because they're just going to feed him the football, and hope things go well. But I do think it knocks those guys down. Like, I would much rather have Aaron Jones for the Packers and a team that, they're lacking weapons, but they're still probably going to score than Nick Chubb or Alvin Kamara, that rather than Nick Chubb. So I think it does knock those weapons down. And honestly, the receivers for bad teams, I'm generally out. Like, sometimes you can get a Brandon Cooks for Houston, just gets enough because no one else is there, but it's never wins you the league. It's never your top guy. Like, I would much rather invest in better offenses.
Yeah. I was just going to mention Cooks. He's a patron saint of the good player on a really bad team. In terms of running backs, is there anyone that you think is going to have a breakout season that not a lot of people are talking about?
I really like Chase Edmonds in Miami. I think he was very talented in Arizona, was banged up a lot. Maybe that happens again, but I think on a point per game basis, I think Miami's going to be good. They got Tyreek Hill. They have Jalen Waddle. I think, McDaniel, their coach, is really smart and savvy. That zone blocking scheme we saw in San Francisco and with the Mike Shanahan back in the day in Denver, great for running backs. Looks like Chase Edmonds is going to get most of the carries. I think he's a guy that you can grab fairly late and, can really break out and get you those big points. And I'll give kind of a contrarian pick here. So there's one guy that's been falling like deathly down draft boards. That's Antonio Gibson, the running back for the Washington Commanders, because everyone's like, oh, he played like some special team snaps in camp or something, and he's like falling hard. Do I think he's going to be like amazing? No, but there's an instance where take him as your second running back it's probably gonna be fine. Like he's probably gonna do all right, you know. And then like you're just fine, but now you have stacked receivers or whatever. So you know, I like him decently, and I mentioned Aaron Jones, but I also like AJ Dillon. I think Green Bay is going to run the ball a lot. I don't think they have a lot of good receiving options. I think it's going to be passes to the running backs and running backs running the football. I think both those guys could have double-digit touchdowns.
It makes me laugh when something happens in a preseason game or someone sees something in a practice or something like that. Like, really, guys, come on. It's just we're talking about practice. Come on. I mean, yeah. It just makes me laugh. We've seen some players have horrible preseasons, and then in the regular season they start out fine. Sometimes they get hurt. They're hurt all preseason, and then in the regular season they're just fine. It's like, we're just holding you out. They're just being held out for until it counts. So whatever. Speaking of Chase Edmonds, he's in the category I call, we paid you a lot of money, so we better play you. You don't give somebody a big contract and say, we're not going to use you that much. I put him in that category. Christian Kirk of the Jaguars. And I put Ezekiel Elliott of that, because the big question is it going to be him or Tony Pollard? It's like, well, one of them they gave a lot of money to, so they're probably, whether he deserves it or not, Zeke is going to get a lot of attention.
There's so many games last year. I was like, just take Zeke out, please.
Yeah.
Like, he was hurt. You could tell, but like you said, they paid him that money. They are running him into the ground, which could make him an interesting value too. I think following the money is never a bad thing to look at who's going to get playing time, because these GMs and coaches want to justify their decisions.
Yeah. As far as wide receiver sleepers, who are you thinking of?
I'll kind of go down a couple guys on my list. Like a pretty big name that I think is gonna maybe be a top 5 receiver this year is Cortland Sutton in Denver. Like Russell Wilson going there, I think it's just such a huge coup. I'm not a huge Jerry Jeudy guy. I think he's fine, but I think Cortland Sutton is the number 1 receiver. And we saw what, Russell Wilson did with DK Metcalf his rookie year. So I'm a big fan of Sutton. I think if there's a guy that has like top 5 potential that you can get at wide receiver 15, 17, I think he's kind of the guy. We talked rookies before, but I like some of these rookies. I think it's worth, like I said, filling your bench with just a bunch of these rookie receivers. I'll take Drake London in Atlanta. There's a team, Atlanta's not going to be good, right? But there's a team with literally 2, it's Kyle Pitts and it's Drake London. They're just going to throw the ball to those guys. The defense is going to be bad. They're going to be giving up 30 points a game. They're going to throw a ton. I don't care who the quarterback is. It could be, who Bobby Brister. They'll throw the ball a ton, and like that's going to be good. And then some deeper guys I like Nico Collins for Houston. I think he looks good in camp. I think he's a guy that can emerge. I really like coming out of Michigan last year, but that team was just so bad that was kind of a problem. So I like him as well. It's kind of a deep last round kind of flyer guy.
There were so many big changes to teams. Yeah, Russell Wilson going to Denver, that is huge for that entire that team now has a good quarterback, and that it's just going to boost that whole offense, right? I mean, even Javonte Williams is probably going to be have a strong year, right?
Yeah, I think he's, people are a little scared of Melvin Gordon, but Melvin Gordon basically came out and said, hey, Javonte's the guy. Like I'm taking a step back from what I did last year. So yeah, I think that's why I think like Cortland Sutton, Judy. I like Tim Patrick a lot before he tore his ACL and he's out for the year. For the third receiver, I thought he was going to get a lot of playing time, but they didn't, once again, follow the money. They didn't give Russell Wilson that contract and trade for him to be like, let's run the ball 40 times a game. They're going to let him throw it. These Denver receivers are going to get targets.
Yeah. Another big one is Devonte Adams going from the Packers to the Raiders. Derek Carr is basically like, I don't want to say a middle of the road quarterback, but he's all right. But I keep seeing him as a lot of like on a lot of sleeper lists that he's going to have a good year. It's like, I don't know. I mean, in theory, if that works out, you just put one of the best wide receivers on the team. It can't do anything but help, right?
Like I'm like you. Like I don't think Derek Carr is that great, but you look back the first 5 games. I think last year he was the QB3 in fantasy. So he's shown that he can do it even without the weapons. Now you toss in Devonte Adams, and kind of the same deal with Josh McDaniels. Like they did not, Josh Jacobs did not get the 5th-year option, so he's going to be gone after this year. They drafted Zamir White, but signed Amir Abdul. Like they don't really have the running backs, I think, to have this big running game, like the Patriots have the past couple of years. So I do kind of like the Raiders' options. I even like Darren Waller, a tight end, because he doesn't have to face double teams every play like he did last year when they had no one else. I think it's going to be really interesting.
And the Packers losing Devonte Adams, I'm not sure who's going to benefit from that. Like you said, they might go to a more run heavy offense, considering Aaron Rodgers is old. And who's left? Lazard, is he going to be the top guy? Or I know they drafted Christian Watson, I think his name is. They drafted someone, but really there's a big unknown.
It is, and if you can hit on whoever that number 1 receiver is going to be for the Packers, like it's probably going to pay dividends. A lot of people, the smart people are betting on Allen Lazard, but I just don't think he's that good. I don't think he's just good enough to do that. And so, then you start looking at, you mentioned Christian Watson, who's been hurt for most of camp. And the guy that's been getting the publicity is Romeo Doubs, their later pick from Nevada, who's Aaron Rodgers has kind of raved about and like once on the field. And then they have a bunch of these like scrubs like Sammy Watkins and Randall Cobb. And, those guys could catch a decent amount of passes. So it's like, who do you bet on? I've almost been taking Romeo Doubs late just in case. If he does nothing for 2 weeks, I'll cut him, but that's kind of been my approach. I just can't buy Lazard at this point. He'll have a big game or two, but will I know when to start him? Probably not.
He is what he is. It's Cinderella has to turn into a pumpkin at some point. He could have a good game or two. The other one is the Chiefs losing Tyreek Hill, and they bring in Juju Smith-Schuster, and I believe from the Packers, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Is it basically just going to be using Kelsey as the primary one? Is he going to get a boost and then they'll spread it around, or what are we hearing about the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think Kelsey becomes an intriguing option in round 2 because he's going to be the primary guy there, and so you can get a big advantage at tight end. The buzz has been with Juju. It seems like him and Mahomes have developed a good rapport. I think he's going to probably play the Tyreek Hill role. Now Juju Smith-Schuster can't do anything close to what Tyreek Hill did, but I think you'll see a lot of short targets kind of go his way. But I like taking the shots on the late guys, like mentioned Marcus Valdes-Scantling, MVS. He'll probably have some big catches. I like Skye Moore, the rookie they drafted out of Western Michigan. Probably is going to take a little bit to get going, but there's a chance he's the most talented receiver in that group. If that's the case, by mid-season, he could win you a couple weeks. So I've been taking a little bit of Juju and sprinkling in some Skye Moore there too.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting with Juju. We know what he's like from all his years in Pittsburgh. It's going to be interesting what he sees with an improvement at quarterback. That's for sure. So that will be very interesting. Speaking of the Steelers, wow. Obviously Najee is going high, almost top 10 in drafts. But what about, Deontay Johnson's going sort of high, but then should any of the other should we take a chance on Chase Claypool or George Pickens, or we don't even know who the quarterback is going to be. It's just, you just stay away from that situation, right?
Yeah, look, I think if you're down to the last round and you could take George Pickens with the hype, the camp hype, like take him. If he plays, there's a chance he could do just as well as probably better than Chase Claypool, and might do, do have some games just as well as Deontay Johnson. Honestly, I think it's an upgrade at quarterback. I don't know how you feel. I think it's an upgrade. I don't care who it is. Like, Ben
Right,
couldn't throw it more than 5 yards last year. So I almost think the Steelers are coming at a value because people think this offense is going to get worse. When I'm like, I think it's going to get better. Like, maybe the offensive line will be bad again, but I think in terms of passing, like, I think it will get a little bit better this year. They can actually run that offense. So yeah, I like taking Pickens in the last round, even if you have a deeper league, like taking Claypool and just, once again, wait a couple weeks. If he's not doing anything, you can cut him. But you never know what can happen there.
Yeah. All right. Well, we know what your Twitter address is because of the
That's
wonderful sign. But what's how else can people find your work?
Yeah, you can find me over at draftcountdown.com. It's where I do my NFL draft work, a little bit of fantasy work. So you can head over there. We just launched a Discord for that if you want to chill and talk football. And then I do a fantasy podcast, Debbie Marketplace. You can look that up wherever you get your podcasts.
I love Discord. Discord's a great, it's a great thing for just chatting with like-minded people and having great discussions. It's great.
And I was like, in the 2000s, I was a big forum guy, and I'm like, this has basically replaced that, and that was my jam back then. So we're trying to get it going again.
It's perfect. Yeah, it's perfect. You really can't do that on Twitter. You really can't do I mean, it's more of maybe a Reddit thing, but Discord's great for just forum discussions, topics, stuff like that. It's perfect.
Yeah, I'm excited for the football season. I think it's going to be a fun play. That's where I'll be, hanging out, just talking with people. So
very cool. Very cool. All right, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for the time.
No, thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.